Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. You know those tiny towns in Oregon where nothing ever seems to happen? The kind of places with one gas station, a post office, and maybe 200 people? Well, tonight you're going to hear 8 true stories that prove those quiet little towns are hiding something much darker than you'd ever imagine. We've got stories from people with normal jobs, truck drivers, mail carriers, cooks working the night shift. Regular folks who thought they were just going about their day until they saw something that changed everything. Something they were never supposed to see. Something the government doesn't want you to know about. If you're new to Mr. Midnight, hit that subscribe button right now, because we bring you real horror stories that actually happened. These aren't made up, these are true events. Ring that bell so you never miss when we drop our next video. Now, before we start, I need to warn you, some of these stories are seriously disturbing. So turn off your lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't watch this alone. Let's begin. My name is Steve Morrison, and I need to tell you about something that happened in Eastern Oregon that the government doesn't want you to know about. I've been an electrical lineman for Pacific Power for 12 years. I started as an apprentice straight out of Chemeketa Community College, worked my way up to journeyman, earned my underground distribution certification and high-voltage specialist rating. I've restored power after the Eagle Creek fire, worked through ice storms that knocked out half of Portland, and fixed lines during flash floods that washed out entire substations. My training officer used to say I had a gift for electrical work. I could hear problems in power lines before meters detected them, could spot failing equipment from a quarter-mile away. My supervisor, Mike, always called me when other crews couldn't figure out what was wrong. In 12 years, I'd never encountered an electrical problem I couldn't diagnose and fix. That changed on October 15, 2024, in Dayville, Oregon, population 149. What I found there? Christ, even now my hands shake when I think about it. The government classified everything that happened as a weather-related grid anomaly, but I'm done keeping their secrets. People deserve to know what's buried under that town, and what it's doing to families like the Petersons. I work out of Pacific Power's Bend district, covering territory from Sisters to John Day, 2 PA, roughly 3,000 square miles of high desert, small ranches, and tiny communities connected by aging power infrastructure. Most of my calls are routine: replace a burned-out transformer, fix storm damage, investigate power quality complaints. The territory's tough: wind, ice, summer heat that cracks insulators. But it's honest work with problems that have solutions. That Tuesday started before dawn with dispatch calling an emergency. Complete power outage in Dayville. Town dark for 3 days straight. But here's what bothered me. They'd already sent 2 crews out there. Jenkins and Martinez, both 20-year veterans I'd trust with my life. Both came back reporting equipment failures and anomalous readings they couldn't explain. Mike pulled me aside at 6 a.m. "Steve, I need my best troubleshooter on this." Jenkins called in yesterday saying his meters were acting possessed, his exact words. Martinez lasted 4 hours before he left town, saying his truck's electrical system was failing and he didn't feel safe. I loaded extra diagnostic equipment, backup multimeters, oscilloscope, spectrum analyzer, Geiger counter, even my grandfather's analog volt-ohm meter from the 1960 seconds. The kind with actual needle gauges instead of digital displays. If there was electromagnetic interference affecting modern equipment, the old analog gear might still work. The drive to Dayville takes 2 hours east on Highway 26 through Ochoco National Forest and into high desert country. I'd driven this route maybe 50 times over the years. The power lines run parallel to the highway, standard 69 kilovolts transmission on weathered wooden poles. Nothing unusual about the infrastructure. But 20 miles out from Dayville, I noticed something wrong. No birds. The power lines are usually lined with hawks, ravens, even eagles perched on the crossbeams. That morning, nothing. Just empty lines stretching across sagebrush hills under an overcast sky that felt too heavy, too low. 10 miles out, my truck's radio started crackling with static. Then my GPS began glitching. The screen would flicker, show impossible coordinates, then go blank for several seconds. By the time I reached Dayville's town limits, every electronic device in my truck was malfunctioning. Dayville sits in a valley surrounded by low hills, maybe 40 houses scattered around a main street with a post office, general store, and volunteer fire station. Driving into town was like entering a dead zone. No electric hum from transformers. No LED lights on electronic signs. Even the streetlights were dark in broad daylight, which told me this wasn't just a nighttime outage. I parked near the first utility pole and started testing. The moment I powered on my digital multimeter, the display went insane. Numbers flashed randomly. Negative voltages, impossible current readings, symbols that weren't even in the meter's programming. I tried my backup meter, same thing. Even my analog voltage detector was spinning wildly, the needle jumping between 0 and maximum like it was picking up some kind of signal that shouldn't exist. That's when I met Helen Peterson. She came out of the general store, moving like someone twice her 70 years, wearing a thick winter coat, even though it was maybe 50 degrees outside. "You the power company man?" she asked, her voice hoarse like she'd been crying. "Yes, ma'am, Pacific Power. I'm here to restore your electricity." She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Son, it ain't just electricity that's broken here." Helen told me the power had died at exactly 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday. She remembered because she was watching the late news when everything just stopped. Not gradually, like a power outage rolling through different circuits. Everything electronic in town died simultaneously, down to the second. "My husband Earl's pacemaker stopped working," she said, her voice breaking. 20 years that thing kept him alive, never missed a beat. Tuesday night it just quit. Battery backup, everything. Doc Harrison tried to help, but his medical equipment won't work either. We got Earl to the hospital in Prineville, but soon as we crossed back into town limits yesterday, the pacemaker failed again. I stared at her. Pacemakers don't just stop working. They're built with multiple redundant systems, backup batteries, fail-safes designed to prevent exactly what she was describing. "Ma'am, when you say everything stopped working, I mean everything." Helen's voice was steady now. Matter of fact, in that way people get when they've accepted something impossible. Cars won't start inside town limits. Flashlights dead. Wind-up clocks stopped ticking. Even Earl's mechanical wristwatch, EC, the one that belonged to his grandfather, it just stopped. Wind-up clocks, mechanical watches, those don't use electricity. There's no scientific reason for them to stop functioning unless something was interfering with basic physics. Helen continued. "My neighbor tried to use her battery-powered radio to call for help. Thing was working fine Tuesday afternoon, but Wednesday morning, it was dead. Fresh batteries, didn't matter. Radio works perfect soon as you take it outside town limits, dies the minute you bring it back." I thanked Helen and walked back to my truck, mind racing. I radioed for Mike, but got only static. Tried my cell phone, no signal, and the battery was draining visibly, even though it had been fully charged 20 minutes earlier. I decided to test Helen's claim about the town boundary. I drove west on Highway 26, testing my equipment every quarter mile. At exactly 2.3 miles from what appeared to be the geographic center of Dayville, everything started working normally. Radio came through clear, GPS locked onto satellites, multimeter showed standard readings. I drove back toward town, and at that same 2.3-mile mark, everything failed again. It was like crossing an invisible wall where the laws of electricity simply stopped applying. Back in town, I started talking to other residents, and every conversation made the situation more disturbing. Tom Bradley, the volunteer fire chief, showed me their emergency equipment. "Diesel generator runs fine," he said, pointing to a unit behind the fire station. "Engine turns over smooth as silk, but no electrical output. We tested it with our backup multimeter before everything went haywire. Now the meter won't even power on." Sarah Chen, who ran the town's small works medical clinic, was dealing with something worse. "We've got 3 diabetics in town who depend on electronic glucose monitors," she told me. "Their backup supplies ran out yesterday. Manual testing shows their blood sugar levels are dangerous, but I can't get any electronic medical equipment to function if this continues much longer." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. By noon, I was documenting a phenomenon that violated everything I knew about electrical systems. The affected area was a perfect circle with a 2.3-mile radius. Every electronic device failed inside that boundary, not just power grid equipment, but batteries, electronic circuits, even simple LED flashlights. Most disturbing were the mechanical devices that had stopped working. Wind-up clocks, manual watches, even spring-loaded mechanisms. I called Mike from outside the interference zone, and his response chilled me. "Steve, I've got the regional manager and some federal people on a conference call. They want you to investigate the old mining area south of town." "What mining area?" "Check your geological survey maps. There's an abandoned uranium mine called the Lucky Strike, sealed in 1962. Something about radiation contamination and worker safety issues." I found the mine easily. My GPS worked fine until I got within that 2.3-mile radius of town. The Lucky Strike was marked on old survey maps, accessible by a dirt road that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. What I found there made my blood run cold. The mine was supposed to be permanently sealed, but someone had recently broken through the concrete cap. Fresh concrete chunks scattered around the entrance, tire tracks from heavy equipment, and cuts in the chain-link fence that were clean and new, maybe days old, not years. More disturbing were the warning signs. The original 1,962 government placards about radiation hazards were still there, weathered but legible. But someone had posted new signs, minus, temporary ones, printed on standard paper, laminated hastily. Authorized personnel only D. Project Blackout. Deadly Force Authorized. Project Blackout. That wasn't any Pacific Power designation I'd ever heard of. I gathered my safety equipment and rope from the truck. I know it sounds reckless now, but I was still thinking like an electrical worker trying to solve a power problem. If something in this mine was generating electromagnetic interference across a 2.3-mile radius, I needed to identify it and report back. The shaft dropped 30 feet straight down before opening into horizontal tunnels. My flashlight worked normally down there. First time in hours any electronic device had functioned properly. The mine showed evidence of 1,960 seconds uranium extraction. Pick marks in the walls, rotting wooden support beams, rusted ore carts on narrow-gauge tracks. But deeper in, I found evidence of recent excavation. New tool marks in the rock. Modern equipment abandoned in side tunnels. HN, a pneumatic drill. Sections of ventilation ductwork. Even a laptop computer that someone had left behind in their hurry to leave. The fresh digging led to a chamber that definitely wasn't part of the original mine. Someone had used explosives to blast through solid basalt, creating a cavern about 20 feet across. And at the center of that cavern, partially excavated from the chamber floor, was something that made my rational mind shut down completely. The object was roughly spherical, maybe 10 feet in diameter, composed of some material that hurt to look at directly. Not metal, not stone, but something that reflected light in patterns that made my eyes water and my head throb. The surface was covered in geometric designs that seemed to shift and move when I wasn't looking straight at them, like they existed in more dimensions than my brain could process. Not mechanical noise, but something deeper and more complex. Harmonics that seemed to resonate in my bones. Frequencies that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The sound wasn't just audible, it was tactile, pressing against my skin like invisible hands. I tried to photograph it with my digital camera, but the LCD screen showed only static. Even looking through the optical viewfinder made me nauseous. The object seemed to bend space around itself, creating visual distortions that violated perspective and geometry. My analog volt-ohm meter, the one device that had worked consistently, started giving readings that were physically impossible. The needle spun in full circles, occasionally pointing to numbers beyond the meter's range, as if it were detecting forms of energy that didn't exist in any physics textbook. The most disturbing thing was what I found scattered around the excavation site: personal belongings from the mining team. Wallets, car keys, cell phones, even glasses and wristwatches, all abandoned hastily, as if the excavation crew had fled in panic. One wallet contained a Department of Energy identification card for someone named Dr. Marcus Webb, dated just 2 weeks earlier. As I knelt examining the abandoned equipment, the humming from the object intensified. My watch stopped working, then started running backward. The temperature in the chamber dropped 20 degrees in seconds, and my breath began fogging even though I was underground where temperature should be stable. That's when I realized the object was affecting more than just electronics. It was distorting physical laws within its influence zone. Time, temperature, electromagnetic fields. 7. Everything was wrong near this thing. I climbed out of the mine shaft as fast as my safety gear would allow, heart hammering against my ribs. Back on the surface, all my equipment immediately failed again. But now I understood why. There was something buried under Dayville that predated human technology, something that modern science couldn't explain or control. I drove outside the interference zone and called Mike immediately. I found the source, I told him. But this is way beyond electrical repair. You need to contact federal authorities right now. What kind of source? Something that doesn't belong in a uranium mine. Something that's generating a field powerful enough to shut down every electronic device in a 2.3-mile radius, and it's affecting people's medical equipment. People are going to die if this continues. Long pause. Steve, I need you to return to base immediately. Don't discuss this with anyone. There are federal agents already en route to Dayville. Mike, there are people in that town whose lives depend on electronic medical devices. Whatever's down in that mine is Steve. His voice was sharp, official. Leave Dayville immediately and report to my office. That's a direct order. The drive back to Bend was the longest 2 hours of my life. I kept thinking about Earl Peterson's pacemaker, about Sarah Chen's diabetic patients, about that impossible object humming in the darkness beneath the Lucky Strike mine. When I reached Pacific Power's office, Mike was waiting with 3 men in dark suits. They identified themselves as Department of Energy investigators, but something about them felt wrong, too polished, too prepared, like they'd been expecting this conversation for weeks. They questioned me for 8 hours. What exactly had I seen in the mine? What measurements had I taken? Who had I spoken to in Dayville? They made me draw diagrams of the object, describe the geometric patterns on its surface, estimate its size and composition. When I asked about the abandoned DOE identification card I'd found, their whole demeanor changed. One agent, who'd introduced himself as Agent Collins, leaned forward with cold eyes. Mr. Morrison, you're going to sign a federal non-disclosure agreement regarding everything you witnessed in Dayville. You will not discuss these events with family, friends, colleagues, or media. Violation of this agreement carries a minimum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. What about the people in town? Earl Peterson needs his pacemaker to work. There are diabetics who, the situation in Dayville has been resolved. Collins interrupted. Power was restored this morning through repairs to equipment damaged by solar storm activity. Solar storms don't affect wind-up clocks or create perfect circular interference zones. Agent Collins smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Morrison, trauma and stress can affect memory formation. Electronic equipment failures often seem more extensive than they actually are when witnessed under high-stress conditions. We've reviewed your incident report, and everything you experienced has conventional explanations. They made me sign papers I wasn't allowed to read completely, transferred me to a different territory, effective immediately, and suggested I consider early retirement if I had ongoing concerns about equipment reliability issues. The next day, Pacific Power announced that the Dayville power outage had been resolved through standard maintenance procedures following solar storm damage. Local news reported the incident as a routine grid restoration, no mention of the 3-day duration or the impossible equipment failures. But I've been monitoring power outages across Oregon and Washington, and there's a pattern. Small rural communities reporting brief but total electrical failures, always in circular areas, always resolved quickly by federal technical support teams. Burns, Oregon in November. Fossil, Oregon in December. Each incident lasting exactly 72 hours before sudden restoration. I tried to contact Helen Peterson 6 months after the incident. The phone number was disconnected. Property records show the Peterson house was sold to a federal land management company in December. Tom Bradley, the fire chief, apparently took early retirement and moved out of state. Sarah Chen's medical clinic was consolidated with a larger facility in John Day. Most of the long-term residents of Dayville have relocated within 6 months of the incident. New residents have moved in, young families with government jobs, all arriving around the same time, all with security clearances that prevent discussion of their work. I still drive past Dayville sometimes, though I never enter the town limits. There's a new communications tower on the hill south of town, bristling with equipment I don't recognize. Federal vehicles are parked around it 24/7. The Lucky Strike mine has been sealed again, this time with concrete barriers and military-grade fencing. Whatever was buried under that town is still down there. The government isn't trying to contain it, any team might be. They're learning to harness it. Those solar storm outages, they're field tests. They're figuring out how to weaponize technology that can shut down every electronic device in a given radius. Think about what that means. No communications, no computers, no medical equipment, no vehicles with electronic ignition systems, no power grid. In a matter of seconds, they could send any city back to the pre-industrial age. I carry an analog watch now, a 1960 seconds Timex that keeps running no matter what, and I pay attention when it stops ticking, because that means something is very wrong nearby. The government calls what happened in Dayville an equipment anomaly caused by solar weather. But I was there. I saw what's buried under that town, and I know what it can do. The most terrifying part isn't that this technology exists, it's that they're testing it on American citizens, and they're getting better at using it every time. Earl Peterson died 3 weeks after the incident. Official cause, heart failure. But Helen told me, before she disappeared, that his pacemaker never worked properly again after that Tuesday night in October. That's 18 dead so far, across all the test sites. Officially, natural causes or coincidence, but I know better. My name is Dave Richardson, and I've been driving trucks for 22 years. Started when I was 22, right out of high school. Been all over this country, from Seattle to Miami, from Portland, Maine to San Diego. I've seen it all. Bad weather, crazy drivers, road construction that goes on forever. I've driven through blizzards that would make grown men cry and sandstorms that turn day into night. But what happened 2 months ago on Highway 26 inches Eastern Oregon changed everything I thought I knew about what's really out there on America's roads. I drive for Western Supply Company out of Portland. We haul everything, building materials, farm equipment, food supplies, to small towns that the big chains won't deliver to. It's honest work, and after all these years, I'm good at it. Never had a major accident, never missed a delivery deadline. My rig is a 2019 Peterbilt 379 with a 48-foot trailer. I keep her in perfect condition. That truck is my livelihood. The run to Unity, Oregon, isn't one I get often. Unity's way out in Baker County, population maybe 130 people on a good day. It's the kind of place that exists because it has to, not because anyone planned it. Just a few houses, a post office, and one gas station that stays open 24 hours for truckers and travelers brave enough to take the back roads through Eastern Oregon. It was October 15th, a Tuesday night. I'd picked up a load of winter supplies in Portland, heating oil, canned goods, medical supplies for the small clinic they have out there. Standard stuff for a town getting ready for winter. My GPS said it would take about 4 hours, and I wanted to deliver early Wednesday morning, so I left Portland around midnight. Highway 26 through Eastern Oregon is lonely during the day. At night, it's like driving through the bottom of the ocean. No streetlights, no other traffic, just your headlights cutting through the darkness and mile after mile of empty road. The radio barely picks up anything except static and the occasional trucker on the CB, but even that fades as you get further from civilization. I'd been driving for about 2 hours when it happened. I was making good time, maybe doing 65 in a 55 zone, when something hit my windshield. The impact was huge, like someone had thrown a bowling ball at my truck. The whole cab shook, and I heard the windshield crack. But here's the thing, I didn't see what hit me. My headlights were on, the road was clear, and then, wham. Something big enough to crack reinforced truck glass, but I never saw it coming. I pulled over immediately. Any trucker will tell you, you don't mess around with windshield damage. That glass is all that stands between you and whatever's out there at 65 miles per hour. I grabbed my flashlight and work gloves and climbed out to check the damage. What I saw didn't make sense. The crack ran from the bottom left corner all the way to the top right, a spider web of broken safety glass. But covering the entire windshield was this thick, black substance. At first, I thought it was motor oil. Maybe I'd hit something that had leaked all over my windshield. But this stuff was different. It was thick like honey, completely black, and it was moving. I'm not talking about dripping or running like normal liquid. This stuff was flowing in patterns across my windshield, like it was alive. It would pool in one spot, then spread out in tendrils, then gather itself back together. I'd never seen anything like it. I pulled on my work gloves and grabbed a shop rag from the toolbox. Whatever this stuff was, I needed to clean it off so I could see to drive. The moment I touched the rag to the substance, it started smoking. The black goo ate through my rag in seconds, then started burning through my rubber work gloves. I yanked my hands back and watched my gloves literally dissolve. This wasn't motor oil, this was something that could burn through rubber and cloth like acid. I backed away from the truck, my heart starting to pound. What the hell had I hit? And where was it now? I walked around the rig with my flashlight, checking for damage, looking for whatever had left this stuff on my windshield. The trailer looked fine. The front bumper had a small dent, but nothing major. But there was no sign of what I'd hit. No dead animal, no debris, nothing. That's when I heard it. A scratching sound. Like fingernails on a chalkboard, but louder. It was coming from above me, from the roof of my cab. I pointed my flashlight up and saw something that made my blood run cold. There was something on top of my truck, something big, dark, and moving. The beam of my flashlight caught what looked like wet, black skin stretched over something the size of a telephone pole. As I watched, this thing shifted position, and I could hear it sliding across the metal roof of my cab. I ran back to the driver's side and climbed in, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. Whatever was up there, I wanted to get as far away from it as possible. But as I put the truck in gear and started moving, I could hear it moving too. The scratching got louder, and I could feel the weight of it shifting around on my roof. I checked my mirrors, and what I saw in the reflection of my trailer lights made me almost drive off the road. This thing was enormous, maybe 15 feet long and thick as a telephone pole, covered in shiny black skin that reflected my lights like wet plastic. It had no visible head or tail, just this massive, snake-like body that seemed to flow rather than crawl. And it was wrapped around my entire cab, holding on with what looked like dozens of small appendages underneath. I floored it. My Peterbilt can move when it needs to, and I pushed her up to 70, then 75 miles per hour. But the faster I went, the tighter this thing seemed to grip my truck. When I hit the brakes to slow down for a curve, I could feel it shifting its weight, adjusting its position like it knew exactly what I was doing. This thing wasn't just riding on my truck, it was hunting me. I tried everything I could think of. I swerved back and forth, hoping to shake it loose. Nothing. I hit the brakes hard, thinking maybe I could throw it off. It just gripped tighter. I even tried driving under a low bridge, but the thing flattened itself against my roof like it knew what I was planning. By the time I reached Unity at 3 a.m, this creature had spread itself across my entire trailer. I could see it in my mirrors, a black, glistening mass that covered the roof from front to back, and the smell coming through my air vents was getting worse, like rotting fish mixed with sulfur. The only building with lights on was the 24-hour gas station. I pulled in fast, jumped out of my cab, and ran inside screaming for help. The attendant, a kid maybe 19 years old, took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. "Call the sheriff," I yelled. "There's something on my truck." The kid looked out the window at my rig, and his face went white. He could see the black substance moving across my trailer, flowing like liquid but holding its shape like something alive. He grabbed the phone and called 911. Sheriff Morrison arrived 20 minutes later with a deputy. By the time they got out of their patrol car, the creature was gone. My truck looked completely normal, no black substance, no movement, nothing. But my windshield was completely dissolved. Not just cracked, gone. The safety glass had been eaten away by acid, leaving just the metal frame. "What the hell happened to your windshield?" Sheriff Morrison asked. I told him everything. The impact. The black substance. The creature on my roof. He listened without interrupting, but I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe me. Until he walked around to the side of my trailer. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. The entire side of my trailer was covered in burn marks. Perfect patterns where something had gripped the metal, leaving acid burns in the exact shape of what looked like tentacles or arms. And leading away from my truck was a trail of thick, black slime that disappeared into the burnt river about 50 yards away. Sheriff Morrison took pictures of everything. He scraped some of the slime into evidence bags and called the state lab. When the results came back 3 days later, he called me personally. "Dave, you need to hear this. That substance you described? The lab says it's some kind of biological compound they've never seen before. Proteins and enzymes that don't match anything in their database. Not from any known animal on Earth. That should have been the end of it. I should have taken the insurance money, fixed my truck, and found a different route. But something the sheriff said kept bothering me. You're not the first trucker to report something like this. I started asking around, talked to other drivers at truck stops, posted on the CB radio, searched online forums. What I found scared me more than that night on Highway 26. There were dozens of reports, truckers from Oregon, Washington, Idaho, all describing the same thing. A massive, slug-like creature that attacked vehicles at night. Always near water, rivers, lakes, even irrigation ditches, always targeting drivers who were alone. But here's the scary part. 3 of the truckers who reported these encounters had disappeared. Just vanished. Their trucks found abandoned on the side of the road, windshields dissolved, trailers covered in acid burns. But no sign of the drivers. Sheriff Morrison called me back 2 weeks later. "Dave, I need to tell you something. We've had 2 more reports since yours. Same creature, same MO, but I'm getting pressure from above to keep this quiet. There are people who don't want this story getting out." I knew what he meant. The last thing the state wanted was panic about monsters attacking truckers on rural highways. Tourism would disappear. Shipping companies would avoid the routes. Small towns like Unity would dry up and blow away. But I couldn't let it go. I installed a dashboard camera system in my truck and started carrying a shotgun. If this thing came back, I was going to get proof. 2 weeks later, I was driving the same route, different cargo this time, SO Ged, winter clothing for a store in Unity. I told myself I was being professional, just doing my job. But really, I was hunting. I wanted to face this thing again, to prove I wasn't crazy. It was almost 2 a.m. when my headlights caught something in the road ahead. At first, I thought it was an oil spill, a dark patch across both lanes. But as I got closer, I realized it was moving. The entire road surface seemed to be shifting, flowing like black water. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. My truck hit the edge of this moving mass, and immediately I felt something grab onto my front bumper. The whole rig jerked to the left, like something incredibly strong was trying to pull me off the road. Through my windshield, I could see it rising up in front of me. This creature was bigger than before. 4, maybe 20 feet long now, thick as a tree trunk. And it wasn't alone. I could see at least 2 more of them sliding out of the drainage ditch alongside the highway. My dashboard camera was recording everything as the first creature flowed over my hood and onto my windshield. This time, I could see details I'd missed before. The thing had no eyes that I could recognize, but it was definitely aware of me. It moved with purpose, testing the edges of my windshield, finding the weakest points. The acid started eating through the glass immediately. I could smell the chemical reaction, like burning plastic mixed with rotten eggs. I had maybe 30 seconds before the windshield completely dissolved. I threw the truck in reverse and floored it. The creature held on, but I could feel its grip loosening as I gained speed backwards down the highway. When I hit 40 miles per hour in reverse, it finally let go, flowing off my truck and back into the ditch. I spun the truck around and got out of there as fast as I could, but not before my camera caught something that still gives me nightmares. As I drove away, I could see them in my mirrors. 3 of these massive creatures working together, positioning themselves across the highway like they were setting up another ambush. I posted the dashboard footage online that same day. Within hours, it had been viewed 50,000 times. Within 24 hours, it was trending on social media. News outlets picked it up. Scientists from universities started calling me. But I also started getting other calls. People who didn't identify themselves, telling me to keep quiet. My footage disappeared from several websites. Social media posts about it were being deleted. Someone was working very hard to make this story go away. Dr. Sarah Chen from Oregon State University managed to analyze my footage before it was scrubbed from most sites. She theorized that these creatures were some kind of prehistoric species that had been living underground, possibly for millions of years. Rising groundwater levels due to climate change might have forced them to the surface. They seem to be attracted to metal and petroleum products, she told me over the phone. Like they're trying to understand modern technology. The acid they produce might be a defense mechanism, or possibly a way to break down complex materials for analysis. That made a horrible kind of sense. These things weren't just attacking trucks randomly, they were studying us, learning about our technology, our vehicles, our habits, and truckers driving alone on empty highways made perfect test subjects. It's been 2 months since my last encounter, and I've changed everything about how I work. I don't drive alone anymore. I've partnered with another driver, and we travel in convoy. I've installed more cameras, better lights, and I never take rural routes at night. But sometimes, I catch other truckers looking at me funny at truck stops, like they know something. Word travels fast in the trucking community, and there are drivers out there who've seen things they can't explain, things the government doesn't want us talking about. I still get calls from researchers, from journalists, from people who want to know the truth. But I also get other calls, the kind that make it clear I should keep my mouth shut. I've been offered money to recant my story, threatened if I keep talking about it. The worst part is the nightmares. Every time I close my eyes, I see that creature flowing over my windshield, testing the glass with its acid, learning how to get inside. Sometimes I dream there are dozens of them, working together, developing new strategies to hunt us, because that's what I think is really happening out there. These aren't random animal attacks. This is an intelligent species that sees us as either threats or resources to be studied, and they're getting better at hunting us. If you're a trucker reading this, be careful on those empty highways at night, especially near water. Travel in groups when you can, install cameras. And if you see something impossible sliding across the road in your headlights, don't stop to investigate, just drive. Because they're still out there, still learning, still hunting. And I think they remember me. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been working security for 8 years now. Started right out of high school doing mall security, then moved up to office buildings, warehouses, that kind of thing. I've handled break-ins, drunk guys trying to start fights, even caught a few people trying to steal copper wire from construction sites. I thought I'd seen everything a night shift security guard could see. But what happened last month in Antelope, Oregon, changed everything I thought I knew about my job. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you're guarding against isn't trying to break in. It's already inside, waiting for the right moment to take control. The job in Antelope seemed perfect when I got it. Small town security work, just me watching over the grain elevator complex. Pay was good, better than anything I'd ever made before, which should have been my first warning sign. The town only has 46 people, so after dark, it's just me and those big metal silos reaching up into the sky like giant fingers. Antelope Grain Systems hired me to work the overnight shift, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., 12 hours of walking around, making sure nobody was stealing grain or messing with the equipment. The complex has 5 massive silos, each one about 60 feet tall, connected by a maze of conveyor belts and loading equipment. During the day, trucks come in to pick up grain shipments, but at night, everything shuts down except for the basic electrical systems. My supervisor, Mr. Harrison, gave me a simple routine on my first night. Check all the doors every hour, walk the perimeter fence, test the gate locks, and radio in every 30 minutes to let the answering service know everything was okay. The security office sat in a small building next to the main grain processing facility, with monitors showing feeds from 12 cameras placed around the property. The work was easy, almost boring. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, some sandwiches, maybe a book to read, in between rounds. The only sounds were the wind blowing through the metal structures and the occasional car driving past on Highway 97. Most nights, I'd see maybe 2 or 3 vehicles the entire shift. For my first 2 weeks, nothing strange happened. I'd clock in at 8, do my rounds, radio in on schedule, and clock out when the day shift supervisor arrived at 8 a.m. The pay hit my bank account every Friday like clockwork. I even started thinking about asking for more hours, maybe picking up weekend shifts. But on October 15th, everything changed. I clocked in at 8 p.m. like usual. Cool night, clear sky, no wind, perfect conditions for an easy shift. I did my first perimeter walk, checked all the door locks, and settled into the security office to monitor the cameras. Everything looked normal on the screens. Empty walkways, locked gates, equipment sitting silent in the darkness. At 9:30, I radioed in my first check. Antelope security to base, all clear, no issues to report. The answering service guy, Dave, confirmed he received it. I grabbed my flashlight and keys for the 10 p.m. round. That's when I noticed something weird on the camera monitor. According to the timestamp, it was 10:47 p.m. The screen showed me walking into the main processing building, using my keys to unlock the door and heading inside. Problem was, I was sitting in the security office looking at the monitor. I hadn't left the office since 9:30. I checked the timestamp again, 10:47 p.m. The current time on my watch showed 10:51 p.m. According to the camera, I'd been inside that building for 4 minutes, but I had no memory of going anywhere. My hands started shaking as I rewound the footage. There I was, clear as day, walking up to the main building door at exactly 10:47 p.m. I watched myself pull out the right keys, unlock the door without hesitation, and walk inside like I'd done it 1,000 times before. But my face looked completely blank, like I was sleepwalking with my eyes open. I ran outside and checked the main building door. It was unlocked. I always kept that door locked. It was one of the basic security rules. Mr. Harrison had drilled into me. Inside, I could see footprints in the dust on the floor, fresh prints that matched my work boots. This couldn't be happening. I felt completely awake and alert. I wasn't tired, hadn't been drinking, wasn't on any medication that might cause blackouts. But the evidence was right there on the camera and on the dusty floor. I called Mr. Harrison's emergency number, but the line just gave me weird static and what sounded like voices talking backward. I tried my cell phone, but even though I'd had full signal an hour earlier, now it showed no service at all. I went back to the security office and fast-forwarded through more camera footage. At 11:15 p.m., there I was again, this time heading toward the basement access stairs behind the main building. I watched myself carry a toolbox and work light down those stairs. I'd never been in that basement before. Mr. Harrison said it was just storage and electrical equipment, nothing I needed to worry about. On the screen, I watched myself work down there for 20 minutes, drilling holes in the walls and pulling out electrical wiring. I moved with purpose, like I knew exactly what I was doing. But sitting in the security office, I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't remember any of it. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the basement. The door was propped open with a brick. Inside, I found fresh holes drilled in the concrete walls, electrical wires pulled out and scattered on the floor. The holes were perfectly spaced, like someone was following a detailed plan, but I didn't remember making any plan. I didn't even own a drill. Back in the office, I kept watching the camera feeds, fast-forwarding through the night. At 12:33 a.m., the cameras showed me standing in the main processing area, talking to someone off-screen. I was nodding, listening, responding like I was having a normal conversation. But the other cameras showed the room was empty, except for me. I turned up the volume on the security system's audio recording. I could hear my own voice saying, "Yes, sir, I understand. I'll get the others ready." Clear as day, my voice, my words. But I'd never said those words in my life. I didn't know what getting others ready meant. Then I found the notebook. It was sitting on the desk in the security office, filled with my handwriting. Page after page of detailed plans for something called Project Harvest. Lists of every person in Antelope, their names, addresses, daily schedules, what time they went to bed, which doors they left unlocked, where they kept spare keys. Information about Mrs. Peterson, who ran the post office, Jim, who fixed cars out of his garage, the Walsh family with their 3 kids. I recognized my handwriting perfectly. The careful way I made my lowercase a's, how I crossed my t's. This was definitely my writing, but I didn't remember writing any of it. How could I know that Mrs. Peterson always left her back door unlocked when she walked her dog at midnight? I'd never even talked to Mrs. Peterson. The worst part was finding my security access card being used to unlock all 5 grain silos. According to the computer logs, I'd opened every single one between 1 and 1:30 a.m. But I was supposed to keep those silos locked at all times. That was the most important rule of the job. I ran outside to check the silos. All 5 doors stood wide open, and I could hear sounds coming from inside them, scratching sounds, like fingernails on metal. Whispering voices that seemed to echo up from the bottom of those 60-foot towers. I climbed the ladder on the first silo and looked down inside with my flashlight. What I saw made me almost fall off the ladder. People, dozens of people standing inside the silo, all looking up, at me with blank, empty eyes. I recognized faces from around town, Mrs. Peterson in her nightgown, Jim still wearing his grease-stained coveralls, the Walsh kids in their pajamas. They were all barefoot, like they'd walked here in their sleep. "Mrs. Peterson," I called down. "What are you doing down there?" She didn't answer. None of them answered. They just stood there, staring up at me with those empty eyes. I climbed down and ran to the other silos. Same thing in each one. Every person an antelope, standing motionless inside those grain towers. Men, women, kids, even old Mr. Garcia who could barely walk with his cane. All of them had somehow gotten out of their beds and walked to the grain elevator in the middle of the night. As I watched, they started moving. Not walking exactly, but flowing like water, all in the same direction. They climbed out of the silos using ladders and maintenance stairs, moving in perfect formation toward the main building. I followed them, trying to get someone, anyone, to respond to me. Inside the main building, they arranged chairs in neat rows, like they were setting up for a church service or town meeting. Everyone sat down in perfect silence, facing an empty podium at the front of the room. That's when I blacked out. I woke up sitting in one of those chairs, surrounded by everyone else from town. We were all facing that empty podium, staring straight ahead. I could see myself doing it, but I couldn't control my body. It was like being trapped inside my own head, watching someone else use my body like a puppet. A voice started speaking from the podium area, but no one was there, just empty air. The voice was calm, professional, like a doctor or scientist giving a presentation. "Welcome to the final phase," the voice said. "You have all been chosen for the great work that began 50 years ago." The voice explained that Antelope had been selected as a test site for something called mass behavioral modification. Everyone born in town after 1970 had been given special medication through the water supply since they were children. The grain elevator wasn't really for storing grain. It was a transmission station, broadcasting control signals that could make people do whatever the voice wanted. "Marcus," the voice said, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Your security position was specifically designed to maintain our equipment during activation nights. Your conscious mind was blocked from remembering, but your programmed mind knew exactly what to do." I thought about all those holes I'd drilled, the wires I'd pulled out. I'd been fixing transmission equipment, making sure the mind control signals could reach everyone in town. "Tonight is our final test before expanding to larger population centers." The voice continued. "All residents will now proceed to Highway 97 and create a traffic disruption to test group coordination under stress conditions." Everyone stood up at exactly the same time, including me. We marched outside in perfect formation, like soldiers, heading toward the highway. I could see car headlights in the distance, vehicles approaching on the dark road. As we got closer to Highway 97, I realized what was about to happen. The voice wanted us to walk into traffic, to cause a massive accident. It was testing whether the mind control could make people commit suicide on command. I fought against the programming with everything I had. It felt like trying to lift a car with my bare hands, but somehow I managed to break free just as we reached the edge of the highway. I screamed warnings to the approaching drivers, waving my arms and flashlight. The cars stopped just in time, their headlights illuminating 45 people standing in the road like zombies. My resistance seemed to break the signal for everyone else. People started looking around confused, asking how they'd gotten to the highway in their pajamas. Mrs. Peterson was crying, asking where she was. The Walsh kids were scared and calling for their parents, but the government vehicles arrived within minutes. Black SUVs with no license plates, men in suits who knew exactly what had happened. They told us we'd all experienced a gas leak hallucination from chemicals stored at the grain elevator. They gave us medical checkups, made us sign forms, and drove everyone home. The next day, I went back to the grain elevator to look for the transmission equipment. I found it hidden behind fake walls in the basement, computers, antennas, broadcasting devices that looked like something from a science fiction movie. But when I tried to take pictures with my phone, the screen just showed static. The official report blamed the whole incident on ergot poisoning from moldy grain. Case closed. No investigation, no follow-up questions. The government men packed up all the equipment and left town within a week. I tried to tell people the truth, but nobody believed me. Even the people who'd been standing in the road with me didn't remember anything unusual. They just remembered feeling sick from the gas leak and being grateful the government cleaned it up so quickly. I quit the job and moved to Portland, but I still get phone calls at exactly 2:30 a.m. Always the same voice from that night at the grain elevator. It tells me I can never fully escape the programming, that I'll always be one of them. Sometimes I wake up in the morning with dirt on my shoes and no memory of where I've been. I'm telling you this story because I need people to know what really happened in Antelope, Oregon. And because I've started having blackouts again. Yesterday, I found a notebook in my handwriting with detailed plans for something called Project Harvest, Phase 2. This time, the list has over 1,000 names. My name is Janet Morrison, and I've been delivering mail for the United States Postal Service for 11 years. I started right after high school in Portland, then moved to the Spray, Oregon route 5 years ago when my husband got a job at the lumber mill. Spray is tiny, maybe 160 people on a good day, but my route covers over 200 square miles of ranch land and farm country. I drive a beat-up mail truck through some of the most beautiful and lonely country you've ever seen. Most people think being a mail carrier is easy. Drive around, put letters in boxes, go home. But out here, it's different. These ranchers live miles from their neighbors. Sometimes I'm the only person they see all week. I've delivered medicine that saved lives, welfare checks that kept families fed, and letters from kids serving overseas. I've also found people who died alone and called for help when someone got hurt. It's more than a job, it's a lifeline for these communities. What happened 3 months ago on my Tuesday route to Henderson Ranch changed everything I thought I knew about the people I serve. Some deliveries aren't just mail. Sometimes you deliver yourself right into hell. The Henderson Ranch sits 12 miles northeast of Spray, at the end of a dirt road that winds through sagebrush and rocky hills. Tom and Susan Henderson had been getting mail there for 8 years, mostly livestock supply catalogs, bills, and the occasional letter from their son Mike, who went to Portland State. Their ranch ran about 200 head of cattle on 1,500 acres of high desert pasture. I knew something was wrong that Tuesday morning in March because they hadn't picked up their mail in 2 weeks. The cluster box at the end of their road was stuffed full. Tom Henderson was the type who checked his mail every day, rain or shine. Ranchers out here depend on mail for everything: feed delivery schedules, veterinary supply orders, government paperwork for their cattle operations. My supervisor, Dave, had mentioned it during our morning briefing. Henderson Ranch hasn't been picking up mail. Might want to drive up to the house, make sure everything's okay. This wasn't unusual. Sometimes older folks got sick or hurt and couldn't make it to their mailbox. The drive up their private road usually took about 10 minutes. The truck bounced and rattled over the washboard ruts, kicking up dust clouds in my mirrors. Spring was coming early that year. The snow had melted fast and left the roads muddy and rough. About halfway to the house, I noticed the smell. At first, I thought maybe a deer had died somewhere nearby. Happens all the time out here. Wildlife gets hit by trucks on the highway, wanders off to die. But this smell was stronger, sweeter, like meat left out in the sun too long. Then I saw the cattle. Henderson's herd was scattered across the pasture closest to the road, but they weren't moving. At first glance, it looked like they were lying down, maybe resting in the morning Sunday. But as I got closer, I could see flies. Thick black clouds of them. Every single cow was dead. I stopped the truck and got out to look. I'm not a rancher, but I grew up around livestock. These cattle hadn't been shot or attacked by predators. They looked deflated somehow, like something had drained the life right out of them. Their hides were loose and wrinkled, eyes sunken deep in their skulls. Some had strange cuts on their sides, neat, surgical-looking incisions that had been stitched up with thick black thread. My first thought was disease. Maybe anthrax or some other infection had swept through the herd. But anthrax doesn't make surgical cuts, and it doesn't make cows look like they'd been hollowed out from the inside. I should have turned around right then, should have driven back to town and called the county veterinarian. But Tom and Susan were in their 60s, and if their cattle were dead, they might need medical attention too. People can catch diseases from livestock. My job was to check on them. The ranch house sat on a small rise overlooking the pastures. It was a typical high desert home, single story, metal roof, wrap-around porch to keep the summer sun off the windows. Tom's old Ford pickup was parked in the driveway, and I could see smoke coming from the chimney. Someone was home. I parked my mail truck next to the porch and grabbed their 2 weeks' worth of mail from the back. Mostly bills and catalogs, but there was a thick manila envelope from Portland with no return address. Medical records, maybe, or legal papers. The smell was stronger here. That same sweet, rotting odor I'd noticed near the cattle, but with something else mixed in. Something chemical, like the cleaning supplies they use in hospitals. I knocked on the front door and waited. After a minute, I heard footsteps inside. Slow, shuffling steps like someone was having trouble walking. The door opened, and Susan Henderson looked out at me. Something was very wrong with her face. Her skin had a waxy, yellowish color, like old candle wax. Her eyes were bloodshot and watery, and when she smiled, her lips cracked at the corners. She moved strangely too, like her joints weren't working right. "Oh, Janet," she said, and her voice sounded hollow, like she was talking from the bottom of a well. "How nice of you to drive all the way up here. We've been so busy lately." "I brought your mail, Mrs. Henderson. You haven't picked it up in 2 weeks. Is everything okay?" She reached out to take the mail, and I saw her hands. The skin was the same waxy yellow as her face, and there were needle marks up and down her arms. Fresh ones, with little drops of dried blood around the puncture sites. "Everything's wonderful," she said. "Just wonderful. Mike's been sick, you know, but we're taking such good care of him. Would you like to come in for coffee? I just made a fresh pot." I should have said no. Should have made some excuse and left. But Susan Henderson had always been kind to me. She'd given me homemade cookies at Christmas and asked about my family. If she was sick, if they both were sick, they might need help. "Sure," I said, "just for a minute." The smell inside the house hit me like a physical blow. That rotting meat odor was overwhelming now, mixed with antiseptic and something else. Something that reminded me of the biology lab in high school, where they kept the preserved animals in formaldehyde. The living room looked normal enough. Same furniture, same family photos on the mantel. But there were medical supplies scattered everywhere. IV bags hanging from coat hooks, boxes of surgical gloves on the coffee table, and what looked like blood transfusion equipment set up next to the couch. "Tom's in the kitchen," Susan said, still in that hollow voice. "He'll be so excited to see you." The kitchen was worse. The smell was so strong I had to breathe through my mouth. The table was covered with medical instruments, Beefol's forceps, surgical clamps. Everything was stained dark red-brown, and some of the tools still had pieces of meat stuck to them. Tom Henderson stood at the sink with his back to me. He was wearing surgical scrubs instead of his usual ranch clothes, and they were splattered with blood. When he turned around, I saw he had the same waxy skin as his wife, the same bloodshot eyes. But his face was different. Parts of it looked newer than other parts, like patches of skin had been grafted on from somewhere else. "Janet," he said, his voice just as hollow as Susan's. "Perfect timing. We were just about to start the morning procedure." "Procedure?" I asked. "For Mike," Susan said behind me. "Our boy's been so sick, but Dr. Kovac taught us how to help him, how to make him better." Tom moved toward me, and I noticed he was limping. Not like he'd hurt his leg, but like his muscles weren't working right, like a puppet with loose strings. "We need to show you something," he said. "Something wonderful." I tried to step back toward the door, but Susan was blocking my way. She wasn't threatening me, exactly, but she wasn't moving either. And there was something in her eyes, a desperate, hungry look that made my skin crawl. "I should really get going," I said. "I have more deliveries to make." "Oh, but you can't leave yet," Tom said. "Not until you see Mike. Not until you understand how much we need your help." He grabbed my arm with one of those waxy hands, and his grip was stronger than it should have been. His fingers felt cold and rubbery, like touching raw chicken. He pulled me toward a door I'd never noticed before, a door that led down to the basement. The stairs were old and creaky. The smell got worse with every step. At the bottom, Tom flicked on a light, and I saw what they'd done to their son. Mike Henderson was lying on a makeshift operating table, an old door balanced on sawhorses. He was hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, with tubes running into his arms and throat. But he didn't look like the healthy college kid I remembered. He looked like something from a horror movie. Parts of his body were the wrong color. His left arm was darker than his right, like it had come from someone else. There were stitches everywhere, crude, thick stitches that pulled his skin tight in unnatural ways. His chest rose and fell, but barely. His eyes were open, but they stared at nothing. "Isn't he beautiful?" Susan whispered. "Dr. Kovac said we could save him, said we could make him whole again." "What happened to him?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. "He got sick in January," Tom said. "Started losing weight, couldn't keep food down. The doctors in Portland said it was some kind of wasting disease. Said there was nothing they could do. But Dr. Kovac could help," Susan added. "He said Mike just needed new parts. Fresh parts. Strong, healthy tissue to replace what the disease had damaged." I stared at Mike's patchwork body and felt my stomach turn. "Where did you get the parts?" Tom and Susan looked at each other, and I saw something pass between them, some kind of silent communication. "People don't come out here very often," Tom said slowly, "but sometimes they do. Lost hikers, hunters who wander off the trail, salespeople who take the wrong road. We learned so much from Dr. Kovac," Susan said. "He taught us how to keep them alive during the procedures, how to harvest what we need without damaging the organs. The fresher the better," he said. My legs felt weak. I looked around the basement and saw things I hadn't noticed before. Coolers lined up against the wall, medical equipment that looked expensive and professional, and in the corner, what looked like restraints attached to another table. 8 people, Tom said, following my gaze. 8 good people who helped save our son. The cattle were just practice. Dr. Kovac said we needed to learn proper surgical techniques before working on humans. "You're insane," I whispered. "We're parents," Susan said simply. "We're doing what any parent would do." I started backing toward the stairs, but Tom moved faster than I thought he could. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. "Dr. Kovac said a postal worker would be perfect," he said. "Good muscle tone from all that walking, healthy kidneys from staying active, and young enough that everything's still in good condition." I tried to run, but he caught me before I reached the stairs. The needle went into my neck, and I felt fire spreading through my veins. My legs gave out, and I collapsed on the concrete floor. The drug didn't knock me out. That was the worst part. I could see everything, hear everything, but I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just lay there as they carried me to the operating homing table and started strapping me down. "Don't worry," Susan said, her waxy face hovering over mine. "We'll keep you alive as long as possible, Dr. Kovac taught us how to take organs gradually, over several days. That way they stay fresh, and Mike gets the maximum benefit." They started with my kidney. I felt every cut, every clamp, every stitch. The paralytic drug kept me from moving or screaming, but it didn't stop the pain. I watched my own blood flow into tubes and bags, watched them carry pieces of me to their dying son. For 3 days, they kept me on that table. They took my gallbladder, part of my liver, sections of healthy skin. Between surgeries, they'd give me IV fluids and antibiotics to keep me alive. Susan would sit next to me and talk about Mike, about how much better he was getting with each fresh transplant. On the 4th day, I heard a car in the driveway. Tom looked out the basement window and smiled. "Dr. Kovac's here," he said. "Today we take your heart and the rest of your liver. Mike will be completely healed." Dr. Kovac wasn't what I expected. He was young, maybe 30, with nervous eyes and shaking hands. He looked more like a drug addict than a doctor. "You've done excellent work," he told the Hendersons as he examined me. "Very clean incisions, minimal tissue damage. She should provide enough material to complete the reconstruction." "Will Mike be normal again?" Susan asked. "As normal as we can make him," Kovac said. "Of course, the psychological trauma of the disease may have lasting effects, and the mixed tissue types might cause some rejection issues. But he'll be alive." He opened his medical bag and started pulling out surgical instruments, real ones, professional grade. As he prepared the anesthesia, I felt the paralytic drug starting to wear off. Just a little, enough to move my fingers slightly. "I'll need to work quickly," Kovac said. "The heart transplant has to be perfectly timed, and we don't have proper surgical facilities here." He leaned over me with a scalpel, and I managed to grab it. The blade went into his throat before he could react. Blood sprayed across the ceiling as he stumbled backward, clutching his neck. I rolled off the table, still weak but fighting the drug. Tom lunged at me, but I was ready this time. The scalpel went into his chest, then his stomach, then anywhere I could reach. He fell backward into the surgical equipment, knocking over IV stands and monitors. Susan ran toward me, screaming something about saving her son. I slashed at her face, opening a gash from her ear to her chin. She went down hard, her head hitting the concrete floor with a wet crack. Dr. Kovac was on his knees, blood pouring through his fingers. "Please," he gasped. "I was just trying to help them. They paid me so much money." I didn't stop to listen. I crawled up the stairs, through the house, and out to my mail truck. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely start the engine, but I managed to back out of the driveway and onto the dirt road. I made it about half a mile before I passed out from blood loss. The search team found me 4 hours later, following the trail of blood I'd left on the road. They'd been looking for my truck since I failed to return from my route. The doctors in Portland said I was lucky to be alive. The Hendersons had done permanent damage to several organs, and I needed 12 surgeries to repair everything they'd taken. I spent 4 months in the hospital and another 4 in physical therapy. Mike Henderson died 2 days after the raid. Without fresh transplants, his body rejected the foreign tissue and shut down. The police found evidence of 8 murders in the basement, along with Dr. Kovac's records of similar operations across 5 states. He'd been selling hope to desperate families and teaching them to harvest organs from innocent people. Tom and Susan Henderson were convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. During the trial, they showed no remorse. They insisted they were just trying to save their son. I went back to work 8 months later, but I couldn't handle the rural routes anymore. Too many isolated houses, too many lonely roads. I transferred to the city, where there are always people around and help is never more than a phone call away. Sometimes I still dream about that basement, about the sound of machines keeping Mike Henderson alive while his parents carved up strangers to save him, about the look in Susan's eyes when she talked about her son, that desperate, hungry love that would do anything, hurt anyone, to keep him breathing. They say a parent's love is the strongest force in the world. Maybe that's true, but I learned that love without limits, love without conscience, can become something monstrous, something that transforms good people into predators and turns a quiet ranch house into a house of horrors. I still deliver mail every day, but I never forget that behind any door, in any house, the people you trust might be willing to do anything to protect what they love most, even if it means destroying everyone else. My name is Tony Ramirez, and I've been driving school buses for 15 years. Started right here in Mitchell, Oregon, when my oldest daughter was just starting kindergarten. The pay isn't great, but I love working with kids, and the schedule lets me be home when my family needs me. I've driven every route in this district, from the easy suburban runs to the tough mountain routes where kids live 40 minutes from school. But I specialize in Route 47, TEC, the ranch circuit. These are the hardest kids to reach, living on spreads 30-40 miles from town. Some mornings I'm on the road at 6 a.m., picking up kids whose nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. I've pulled buses out of snowdrifts, fixed flat tires with kids waiting, and even delivered medicine to families during emergencies. After 8 years on this route, I know every pothole, every family, every dog that chases the bus. I always carry extra supplies, first aid kit, emergency food, blankets, flares, even a CB radio backup. You have to out here. Cell service is spotty, weather changes fast, and help is always at least an hour away. The other drivers think I'm paranoid, but I've seen what can happen when you're not prepared. What happened on Friday, October 13th, changed everything I thought I knew about keeping kids safe. Some dangers you can prepare for. Others, you never see coming until it's too late. Friday started like any other day. The morning run went smooth. All 23 kids picked up and delivered to Mitchell Elementary on time. I spent the day doing maintenance checks, cleaning the bus, reviewing my afternoon route, standard stuff. My afternoon run starts at 3:15 p.m. Route 47 covers 6 stops, all ranch families scattered across the high desert east of town. Takes about 2 hours to get everyone home, especially the Morrison kids who live furthest out. I've been driving Jenny and Tyler Morrison for 3 years now. Good kids, never any trouble. The bus runs perfect, 2019 International with only 89,000 miles. Gets inspected every month, serviced every 3,000 miles. I check the oil, brakes, and tires every morning. The radio system connects to dispatch, emergency services, and the State Highway Patrol. GPS tracker shows district exactly where I am every minute. I pulled out of the school parking lot at 3:15 sharp. First 5 stops went normal. Kids talking about weekend plans, some homework getting done. The weather was clear, temperature in the mid-50s. Perfect driving conditions. By 3:40, I only had 8 kids left on the bus. The Morrison place is always my last stop because it's the furthest out, 32 miles from town on a dirt road that winds through state forest land. Their driveway is another mile past where the county road ends. As I turned onto Morrison Road, something felt different. Usually I can see deer, maybe some cattle grazing. Today, nothing. No animals anywhere. Even the birds seemed quiet. At 3:45, I pulled up to the Morrison house. Tyler and Jenny were waiting like always, backpacks ready. But when they climbed on the bus, Jenny looked scared. Tyler, who's 9, seemed nervous too. "Everything okay, guys?" I asked. Tyler just shrugged, but Jenny leaned over the seat toward me. "Mr. Tony," she whispered, "my dad's been acting really weird all week." "Weird how?" "He's been cleaning his guns every night. And he talks to himself about protecting our family from bad people." She glanced back toward the house. "He's watching us right now." I looked in my side mirror. Sure enough, Brad Morrison was standing on his front porch with binoculars, tracking the bus. I'd known Brad for 3 years. He was always friendly, always waved. Never used binoculars before. As we pulled away, I noticed new things around the Morrison property. Fresh barbed wire stretched between fence posts. Bright yellow no trespassing signs every 50 feet. A new gate across their driveway that hadn't been there Monday. "Jenny," I said quietly, "has your dad said anything about strangers coming around?" "He says the government is sending people to spy on us, that they want to take our guns and our land." She was only 7, but she understood something was wrong. Mom just stays in the kitchen and cries. My gut started twisting. Brad Morrison had always been a little paranoid about government stuff, but this sounded different, more serious. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Bus 47. Everything normal out here, but could you make a note that the Morrison family might need a welfare check this weekend?" "Copy, Bus 47. Everything okay with the kids?" "Kids are fine. Just a feeling. Probably nothing." "Roger. Drive safe, Tony." At 4:15, I reached the Wilson Ranch for my second to last stop. But something was wrong immediately. The Wilson kids, Emma and Jake, always waited by their mailbox. Today, nobody was there. I honked the horn twice. Nothing. The house looked empty. No trucks in the driveway, no lights on, curtains all drawn. "That's weird," Tyler said. "The Wilsons never go anywhere on Fridays." I put the bus in park and grabbed my radio. "Dispatch Bus 47. The Wilson kids aren't at their stop and the house looks empty. Should I check on them?" Static, just dead static. "Dispatch, do you copy?" More static. The radio was getting power. All the lights were on, but no signal was coming through. I tried my cell phone. No service. That wasn't unusual out here, but combined with the radio problems, it made me nervous. "Wait here, guys. Keep the doors locked. I'm going to check on the Wilsons." I walked up to the house and knocked. No answer. The front door was unlocked, which was normal for ranch families, so I pushed it open. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson? Emma?" The kitchen was a mess. Chairs knocked over, drawers pulled out, papers scattered everywhere. But what made my blood run cold was the dark stain on the linoleum floor near the sink. It looked like dried blood. I backed out of the house fast. Whatever happened here, the Wilson family was gone, and it wasn't voluntary. I ran back to the bus. The kids could see on my face that something was seriously wrong. "We're skipping the last stop," I announced, trying to keep my voice calm, going straight back to town. "What about the Campbell kids?" Jenny asked. "I'll call their parents from town." I started the engine and swung the bus around. "Everyone, buckle up tight." But as we reached the main road, my headlights showed a problem. 3 large pine trees were lying across the road, completely blocking our path. These weren't blown down by wind. The cuts were too clean, too deliberate. "Mr. Tony," Tyler said, Those trees weren't there when we came in. He was right. Someone had cut those trees down while I was checking the Wilson house, which meant someone was watching us. I put the bus in reverse, but before I could back up, I heard the sound of more trees crashing down behind us. In my mirrors, I saw we were completely trapped. Kids, get down low in your seats, right now. That's when the men appeared. 6 figures in military camouflage stepped out of the forest on both sides of the road. They carried rifles and moved like soldiers. My headlights caught their faces, and my heart stopped. The leader was Brad Morrison. Brad approached the driver's side door, his rifle pointed at the ground but ready. The other men surrounded the bus, weapons trained on the windows. "Open the door, Tony." His voice was different. Cold. Military. "Brad, what the hell is going on? Where are the Wilsons?" The Wilsons asked too many questions, talked to the wrong people in town. He raised his rifle. "Open the door, or I'll shoot out your tires and force it open." Behind me, the kids were crying. Jenny was sobbing for her dad to stop. I could fight, but 6 armed men against a bus full of kids wasn't odds I could take. I opened the door. Brad climbed aboard, followed by 2 other men. Up close, I could see they were wearing tactical gear, body armor, communication headsets, military-style boots. This wasn't some weekend militia playing soldier. These guys were serious. "Here's what's going to happen," Brad said, pointing his rifle at my chest. "You're going to drive where I tell you to drive. The kids are coming with us as insurance." "Insurance for what?" "We have an operation planned for Monday morning, Federal Building in Bend. These children guarantee that we get safe passage afterward." I felt sick. These men were terrorists, and they were using school kids as human shields. "Brad, you know these kids. Jenny is your own daughter. Jenny will be fine as long as everyone follows orders. But if anyone tries to be a hero," he gestured toward the other armed men. "Well, we've already dealt with the Wilson family." One of his men pointed a rifle at Tyler's head. The message was clear. "Now drive. Follow the old logging road north." For the next hour, I drove deeper into the national forest on roads I'd never seen before. The men kept their weapons ready and watched every move I made. Behind me, 8 terrified kids tried to stay quiet while their world fell apart. I kept talking to them softly. "It's going to be okay. We're just going on a little detour. Everyone, stay calm." But my mind was racing. These men had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They'd surveilled the area, identified escape routes, even eliminated potential witnesses like the Wilson family. The only reason I was still alive was because they needed someone to drive the bus. At 6:30, we reached their camp. It was hidden in an abandoned mining operation from the 1972. Old concrete buildings, rusted equipment, perfect concealment. I counted at least 20 more men, all armed, all wearing the same tactical gear. This wasn't just Brad Morrison and some angry neighbors. This was a real militia organization. They forced us into one of the old mining buildings, a concrete structure with 1 door and no windows. The kids huddled together while I tried to figure out our options. "Mr. Tony," Jenny whispered, "are we going to die?" "No, sweetheart, I promise. We're going to get out of here." I had no idea how, but I meant it. While the men argued outside about guard schedules and attack plans, I explored our prison. The building had been used for equipment storage. Old mining tools, generators, even some leftover dynamite from the original operation. That's when I got an idea. In the back corner, I found what I was looking for. An old ventilation shaft that connected to the main mine tunnel. It was narrow, barely wide enough for adults, but perfect for kids. "Listen carefully," I whispered to the group. "We're going to play a game of hide and seek. When I give you the signal, you're all going to crawl through that tunnel and come out about half a mile down the mountain." "What about you?" Tyler asked. "I'm going to create a distraction to give you time to escape." At 8 p.m., I put my plan into action. Using some of the old mining explosives and a timer from one of the generators, I set up a small charge in the building across the camp. Not enough to hurt anyone, just enough to draw attention. When it went off, every armed man in the camp ran toward the explosion. In the confusion, I got the kids into the tunnel. "Follow this all the way to the end," I told them. "When you get out, hide until morning. Search planes will find you." Jenny grabbed my hand. "Come with us. I can't fit through there, and someone needs to make sure you get away safely." The tunnel worked perfectly. By the time the militia realized what had happened, the kids were long gone. But now they were furious, and I was trapped. They beat me, demanding to know where the children went. When I wouldn't talk, they tied me up and brought out the dogs. I knew the kids would need time to get far enough away, so I broke free and ran in the opposite direction, making as much noise as possible. The dogs and half the militia followed my trail, just like I hoped. I led them on a chase through the forest for 2 hours before they cornered me at the edge of a cliff overlooking the crooked river. Below, the water was dark and moving fast. "End of the line," Brad Morrison said, raising his rifle. I thought about my own kids at home, about Jenny and Tyler and all the others I'd sworn to protect. Then I jumped. The fall nearly killed me. I hit the water hard, broke my left leg, and got swept downstream in the freezing current. But I survived. And more importantly, the kids had gotten away. Search helicopters found the children the next morning, exactly where I'd told them to hide. They were scared and cold, but alive. The FBI used their information to raid the militia camp, but Morrison and most of his men had already fled. They found me 12 hours later, 2 miles downstream, barely conscious from hypothermia and blood loss. Spent the next 3 months in the hospital, but I recovered. The investigation revealed a nationwide network of militia groups planning coordinated attacks on federal buildings. My kids' testimony helped convict 15 terrorists and prevented what could have been the worst domestic terror attack since Oklahoma City. Morrison was captured 6 months later in Idaho, planning another bombing. He's serving life in federal prison now. I still drive school buses, but everything's different. I carry GPS trackers, satellite phones, direct lines to the FBI. The kids from that day still keep in touch with me. They call me their hero, but honestly, they saved themselves by being brave when it mattered most. Some days, driving past the Morrison Ranch, I still get nightmares. But then I remember those 8 kids trusting me to get them home safe. And I did. That's what matters. My name is Miguel Santos, and I've been working as a night shift cook for 8 years. Started when I was 21 at a 24-hour diner in Los Angeles. I learned everything from an old chef named Carlos, who taught me that cooking isn't just about food, it's about taking care of people when they need it most. Night shift is different. You get truckers, insomniacs, people running from something, people with nowhere else to go. I've flipped burgers for crying mothers, made coffee for guys who just lost their jobs, served pie to lonely old folks who couldn't sleep. But what happened during my 2 years at the Wasco Truck Stop Diner in Oregon changed everything I thought I knew about taking care of people. Some people don't deserve to be fed. I moved to Wasco in 2019 after my mom got sick and needed help with medical bills. The truck stop paid decent for a small town, $15 an hour, plus tips from the overnight drivers. The work was simple. I ran the kitchen alone from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., serving basic diner food from a menu that hadn't changed since the 1,980 seconds. Burgers, fries, coffee, pie. The grill was an old Vulcan from the 90 seconds that took forever to heat up, but held temperature perfect once it got going. The coffee maker was industrial, made decent brew if you cleaned it right. The whole place was stuck in time, wood paneling, red vinyl booths, a jukebox that still played Patsy Cline. Most nights were quiet. Maybe 20 customers total, mostly truckers grabbing coffee and a quick meal. I kept the place clean, prepped for the morning shift, and minded my own business. The owner, Frank, was fair enough. Paid on time, didn't hassle me about my accent or ask for papers. The day staff was friendly, mostly older women who'd worked there for years. They left me notes about what needed restocking, and I left them notes about any problems with equipment. It was a good system. I kept to myself in Wasco, lived in a little apartment above the hardware store, sent most of my money home to California, saved what I could. The town was small, maybe 400 people, and I could feel some folks staring when I walked to work, but nobody bothered me directly. I figured if I worked hard and stayed quiet, I'd be left alone. That was my mistake. The trouble started on a Friday night in November. It was about 2 a.m., dead quiet except for the hum of the coolers and the distant sound of trucks on Highway 97. I was cleaning the grill when 3 men stumbled through the front door, already drunk and getting louder by the second. I recognized them immediately. The Brennan brothers, Tom and Jake, and their friend Kyle Morrison. Everyone in town knew these three. They owned half the businesses, had family on the city council, thought they ran the place. Tom was the older brother, owned a construction company. Big guy, maybe 6'2", with hands like hammers and a voice that carried across the diner. Jake was younger, worked at the grain elevator, skinnier but mean in the eyes. Kyle was the worst of them, dealt drugs to high school kids and everyone knew it, but his uncle was the sheriff, so nothing ever happened. They slammed into a booth near the kitchen, knocking over the salt and pepper shakers, laughing about something. Tom banged on the table with his fist. "Hey, cook, we want food." I walked over with menus, keeping my voice steady. "What can I get you gentlemen tonight?" Jake looked me up and down, smirking. "Listen to that accent. Where you from, amigo?" "California," I said, setting down the menus. "Kitchen closes at 3, but I can make whatever's on the menu." "California," Kyle repeated, making his voice high and mocking. "Bet you swam here, right? Through the Rio Grande?" I felt my face get hot, but I kept calm. "I'll give you a few minutes to decide what you want." I started walking back to the kitchen, but Tom's voice stopped me. "Hold up there, Pedro. We didn't say you could leave." The smart thing would have been to call Frank or the sheriff. But the phone was in the back office, and these three were between me and the exit. I turned around. "It's Miguel," I said quietly, "and I need to know what you want to order." That's when Jake started laughing. "Miguel." "Oh, excuse me, Miguel. We want the special, Miguel." "What's the special tonight, Miguel?" They kept saying my name wrong, drawing it out, making it sound stupid. Kyle picked up the ketchup bottle and squeezed it onto the table, making a mess. Tom swept the sugar packets onto the floor. Jake started tearing up the menus. "Clean this up, Miguel," Tom said. "That's what you people do, right? Clean up messes?" I got the mop and started cleaning. My hands were shaking, but I tried to stay calm. "Just get through this," I told myself. "They'll get bored and leave." But they didn't leave. They got worse. Kyle grabbed my arm as I was mopping. "You know what I think, Miguel? I think you're here illegally. I think we should call ICE." "I'm a citizen," I said, trying to pull away. Jake stood up. "Prove it. Show us your papers. I don't have to show you anything." That's when Tom stood up too. All three of them were on their feet now, surrounding me. The mop fell out of my hands. "You calling us liars?" Tom said. "In our own town?" I tried to back toward the kitchen, but Kyle grabbed me by the shirt. "Where you going, wetback?" The word hit me like a slap. I'd heard it before, but not like this. Not with 3 men blocking my way out, not at 2 a.m. in an empty diner. "Please," I said. "Just order something or leave." Kyle shoved me hard. I stumbled back into Jake, who pushed me toward Tom. They were playing with me now, passing me around like a ball. "Please what?" Tom said. "Please, massa? That's what you people say, right?" I tried to push past them to get to the phone, but Kyle grabbed me from behind. His arm went around my throat, cutting off my air. Tom and Jake moved in, and I saw Tom's fist coming toward my face. Then everything went black. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital in the Dalles. Broken ribs, concussion, internal bleeding. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. Someone had found me on the diner floor at 6 a.m. when the morning shift arrived. The 3 men were long gone. The sheriff came to see me, Kyle's uncle, a fat man named Brennan. "Different Brennan family," he said. "No relation to Tom and Jake." "Right. Now, Miguel," he said, pulling out a little notebook. "Tell me what happened." I told him everything. The names, the words they used, how they beat me unconscious. He wrote it all down, nodding like he cared. "Problem is," he said when I finished, "those boys tell a different story. They say you attacked them first. Say you came at Tom with a kitchen knife, and they had to defend themselves. Say you were drunk, probably on drugs. That's not true." He shrugged. "It's your word against theirs. No witnesses. Security camera was broken that night. Real convenient, huh? And these are good families, Miguel. Respected families. Been here for generations. So, nothing happens to them? Well, now I didn't say that. I'll investigate. But you might want to think about whether you really want to press charges. Could get messy. Town like this, people don't like troublemakers." The message was clear. Keep quiet or things would get worse. I spent 2 weeks recovering. Frank held my job, but he made it clear he didn't want any more trouble. "Just cook the food and mind your business," he said. "Don't give anyone a reason to complain." When I came back to work, everything looked the same. Same grill, same coffee maker, same red vinyl booths. But it felt different. The diner felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Every time the door opened, I jumped. Every footstep outside made my heart race. But mostly, I was angry. Not just angry, burning inside like the grill on high heat. These 3 men had beaten me half to death, and they were walking around free, laughing about it probably, telling their friends how they put the Mexican in his place. The anger kept me awake during the day. I'd lie in my little apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Tom and Jake and Kyle, thinking about how they looked when they surrounded me, thinking about the words they used, thinking about Sheriff Brennan's fat face when he told me to keep quiet. I started paying attention to things. Small things, like how Kyle came to the diner every Tuesday night around 1 a.m., usually high, always alone. How Tom's construction trucks parked behind the grain elevator when they worked late. How Jake drove the same route home every night, past the old railroad bridge where the road got narrow and dark. I started keeping a notebook. Not for recipes, for information. Kyle sold meth to kids behind the high school gym on Thursday nights. Tom's construction company used cheap materials that didn't meet code. Jake was skimming money from the grain elevator, taking cash payments and not recording them. In a small town, people talk, and night shift workers hear everything. Truckers know which sheriff takes bribes. Waitresses know which city councilman beats his wife. Insomniacs know which businesses are money laundering. When you're invisible like I was, people forget you're listening. It took me 3 months to gather enough evidence on Kyle. Photos of him selling drugs, license plates of his buyers, records of his deals. I sent it all to the state police anonymously. They arrested him on a Wednesday morning with enough meth to charge him with trafficking. But that wasn't enough. While Kyle was in jail waiting for trial, I broke into his house. It was easy. Kyle was stupid, hid his spare key under a fake rock by the front door. I planted a hard drive full of child pornography in his computer, then called in an anonymous tip about suspicious internet activity. When Kyle made bail, the police were waiting. They found the planted evidence and arrested him again. This time, no bail. The federal prosecutor said Kyle was looking at 15 years minimum, 1 down. Tom's construction company was next. I knew which buildings he was working on, which shortcuts he took to save money. I documented everything. Unsafe scaffolding, electrical work that wasn't up to code, concrete that was mixed wrong. I took photos, made reports, sent them to OSHA, but I didn't stop there. I started visiting his job sites at night. A loosened bolt here, a cut cable there. Nothing that would kill anyone, just enough to cause accidents. Workers getting hurt, deadlines missed, insurance claims. The lawsuits started piling up. OSHA fines, injured worker compensation, project cancellations. Tom's company went bankrupt within 6 months. His wife left him, took the kids and the house. Last I heard, he was living in a trailer park outside town, drinking himself to death. 2 down. Jake was the hardest. He was careful with money, smart about covering his tracks. But everyone has weaknesses. Jake's weakness was that he trusted computers too much. I taught myself basic hacking from library books and free internet tutorials. It took weeks, but I finally got into the grain elevator system. I found Jake's skimming operation. It's BSS. He was stealing about $500 a week, small amounts that he thought nobody would notice. I made it look bigger, much bigger. I created fake transactions, altered records, made it seem like Jake had stolen almost $50,000 over 2 years. Then, I sent the evidence to the company's head office in Portland. Jake was fired and arrested within a week. The prosecutor was talking about 5 years in prison, plus restitution he'd never be able to pay. 3 down. But destroying their lives wasn't enough. I wanted them to hurt the way they'd hurt me. I wanted them to be afraid. I took Tom first. Grabbed him outside his trailer one night when he was too drunk to fight back. Drove him to an abandoned barn about 10 miles outside town, the kind of place where nobody would hear screaming. I tied him to a chair and waited for him to sober up. When he came around, I was sitting across from him, wearing the same apron I wore at the diner. "Remember me, Tom?" His eyes went wide. He started struggling against the ropes, but I'd tied them tight. "Miguel, what the hell? Let me go." "You remember what you called me that night? The names you used?" "That was just, we were drunk, man. We didn't mean nothing by it." I pulled out a package of raw hamburger meat. It was old, green around the edges, smelled like death. I'd been keeping it in my car for a week, letting it rot. "You said I was supposed to clean up messes," I said. "Well, here's your mess." I forced the rotten meat down his throat. Made him eat every piece while I explained how E. coli works, how it attacks the intestines, how it can shut down your kidneys if you get enough of it. Tom got sick within hours. Really sick. I dumped him behind the grain elevator where someone would find him, but the damage was done. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and his digestive system never worked right again. Permanent damage, the doctors said. Jake was next. I didn't grab him. That would be too obvious. Instead, I poisoned his food slowly, a little bit each time he came to the diner. Antifreeze in his coffee, just a few drops. Enough to make him sick, but not enough to kill him right away. He got sicker and sicker over the next month. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. His kidneys were failing, his liver was shutting down. He lost weight, his skin turned yellow. Finally, when he was barely hanging on, I told him. Visited him in the hospital one night when the nurses weren't looking. "Jake," I whispered, "it's me, Miguel." He could barely open his eyes. "Miguel? I've been poisoning you," I said. "Every time you came to the diner. Every cup of coffee. Every piece of pie. You're dying, Jake." He tried to speak, but I kept talking. "I can save you. I have the antidote. But you have to do something first. You have to confess, publicly. Tell everyone what you and your brother and Kyle did to me that night." Jake stared at me, his eyes full of hate and fear. "Go to hell," he whispered. "You first," I said. He died 3 days later. Organ failure, the doctor said. Mysterious illness, probably genetic. Kyle didn't last long enough for me to get to him personally. Someone in federal prison decided they didn't like child molesters. Found him in his cell with a sharpened toothbrush in his chest. All 3 of them were gone. Dead or destroyed. I should have felt satisfied, happy, like justice had been served. Instead, I felt empty. I kept working at the diner, but the nightmares started. Not about that night when they beat me, about what I'd done to them. Tom eating rotten meat. Jake dying slowly in the hospital bed. Kyle bleeding out in his cell. I'd become something worse than the men who hurt me. They were bullies, racists, cowards. But I was a killer. The paranoia came next. Every customer looked suspicious. Every phone call might be the police. Every knock on my door might be federal agents. I started seeing patterns that weren't there, hearing conversations that weren't real. Other people in town started talking too. 3 men from the same group of friends, all dead or ruined within a year. The only connection was me, the Mexican cook they'd beaten up right before their lives fell apart. Sheriff Brennan started coming to the diner more often. He'd order coffee and sit in the booth where his nephews had sat that night, watching me work. Never said anything directly, but I could feel him building a case in his head. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything, except what I'd done and what was coming. I tried to leave Wasco, packed my bags twice, but I couldn't make myself drive away. The guilt was too heavy, dragging me down like an anchor. Finally, I went to see Father Martinez at the Catholic Church. Told him everything in confession, death, the beating, the investigation, the revenge, the murders, everything. "My son," he said when I finished, "you have to turn yourself in, I know. What you did to those men, it won't bring you peace. And keeping it secret will destroy your soul. I know that too." I drove to the state police barracks in the Dalles the next morning, walked in and asked to speak to a detective. Told them I wanted to confess to 3 murders and provide evidence of corruption in Wasco. The trial lasted 6 months. Everything came out, the original assault, the cover-up by local authorities, my investigation and revenge. The media called it a case study in how injustice creates vigilantes. The jury found me guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple other charges. The judge gave me life without parole, but he also ordered a federal investigation into Wasco's government and police department. Sheriff Brennan was arrested for corruption. 3 city council members lost their jobs. The whole power structure that had protected Tom, Jake, and Kyle came crashing down. I'm writing this from my cell at the Oregon State Penitentiary. I've been here for 3 years now. Some days I think about what might have happened if I'd just left town after the beating. Moved somewhere else, started over, let the anger go. But most days, I think about the choice I made. I chose revenge over justice, violence over law, hatred over healing. I became a monster to fight monsters, and in the end, I was the only one left standing in a room full of corpses. If you're reading this and someone has hurt you, wronged you, made you feel powerless, I understand that anger. I understand wanting them to pay. But take it from someone who got his revenge. It doesn't heal anything. It just makes more monsters. Choose justice, choose law, choose healing. Choose to stay human. Because once you cross that line, there's no coming back. My name is Amanda Chen, and I've been a park ranger for 8 years. I started right out of college with a degree in forestry and wildlife management. I've handled everything from bear encounters to search and rescue operations in the Oregon wilderness. I've pulled lost hikers out of ravines, treated snake bites, and even dealt with a few drug labs hidden in the back country. But what happened during my first winter season at Sisters State Park changed everything I thought I knew about protecting people from the dangers in the woods. You see, some dangers aren't in any ranger manual. It was October 2019 when I got transferred to Sisters State Park. The previous ranger, Mike Harrison, had put in for early retirement after 23 years on the job. My supervisor, District Manager Carol Webb, said Mike seemed burned out and needed a change. The park was small, only 847 acres, but it stayed busy most of the year with campers and day hikers. "You'll love the winter months," Carol told me during my briefing. "Park gets real quiet. Just you, the wildlife, and maybe a few hardy campers on weekends. Perfect time to catch up on maintenance reports and trail surveys." The ranger station was a small wooden building with solar panels and a radio tower. Inside, I had basic office equipment, a desktop computer that connected to the state park system, and a CB radio for emergencies. My truck was a 2016 Ford F-150 with 4-wheel drive, equipped with first aid supplies, emergency flares, and a spotlight for night patrols. Mike had left everything organized. File cabinets full of incident reports, maintenance logs, and visitor complaints. His handwriting was neat and professional, but I noticed something odd. In his final month, his reports got shorter and shorter. Just basic stuff like patrolled campground, all clear, or checked restrooms, no issues. For a guy who used to write detailed reports about everything from broken picnic tables to unusual animal behavior, it seemed strange. The park itself was beautiful. Dense pine forest, a small lake, and several hiking trails that wound through the trees. There were 2 main camping areas, the front campground near the entrance for RVs and families, and the backcountry sites for people who wanted more privacy. Local people and sisters told me stories about the park. Native American legends, mostly. They said the land was cursed, that children's spirits wandered the forest at night. Typical campfire stories that every park ranger hears. Tourists love that stuff. I'd been there 2 weeks when the night shift started. November 1st, the park switched to winter hours. That meant I worked alone from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., Thursday through Sunday. Quiet time to do paperwork and keep an eye on the few remaining campers. The first week of night shifts was exactly what Carol promised. Peaceful. I'd drive the loop road every 2 hours, check the bathrooms, make sure the campers were following fire regulations. Maybe see a deer or 2 in my headlights. Normal stuff. But on my 8th night shift, I started finding the handprints. I came out to my truck Thursday morning, ready to head home after a quiet night. The sun was just coming up, and there was dew on everything. That's when I saw them, small handprints on my driver's side window. Clear as day in the morning moisture. They looked like kids' handprints, but something was wrong. I counted the fingers. 6 on each hand. The prints were pressed into the dew from the outside, like someone had put their palms against the glass during the night. I checked around the truck. No footprints in the dirt. No other signs that anyone had been near my vehicle. I took photos with my phone and wiped the prints off. Probably just some kids messing around, I figured, maybe using fake hands or something. Friday night, more prints. This time on both side windows and the back windshield. Same six-fingered pattern. I reviewed my patrol logs. I'd checked the parking area 3 times during the night and never saw anyone. By Sunday morning, the prints covered almost every window on my truck. Front windshield, side mirrors, even the small triangular windows by the side doors. All 6 fingers, all pressed from outside while I was making my rounds. I decided to set up surveillance. I borrowed a trail camera system from the equipment shed. 3 wireless cameras that could record in infrared and send alerts to my phone. I set them up around the parking area on Tuesday, covering every angle of my truck. Wednesday night, I checked the camera feeds every hour on my phone. Nothing. Just empty parking lot and my truck sitting under the LED security light. Thursday morning, handprints again. But here's the weird part. When I reviewed the camera footage, the handprints showed up. You could see them appearing on the windows during the night, clear as day. But no one was making them. No person, no animal, nothing. The prints just appeared on their own. I called Carol Webb and explained the situation. She suggested checking for bear activity or maybe teenagers with some kind of prank setup. I told her I'd already considered that, but the cameras would have caught any physical presence. Equipment malfunction, she said. Those trail cameras glitch all the time. I'll send a tech out next week to check your surveillance system. That weekend, I decided to research the local history. If there really were legends about children's spirits, maybe there was some truth behind the stories. I went to the Sisters Historical Society and asked about the parkland. What I found changed everything. The librarian, an elderly woman named Ruth Morrison, pulled out a folder of old newspaper clippings and photographs. In 1847, a group of Paiute families had been living in the area when white settlers arrived. Within months, a strange disease broke out among the tribal children. The newspaper accounts described symptoms I'd never heard of. Children developing extra fingers and toes, growing additional limbs. Their body temperature shooting up to dangerous levels, but they kept living. The disease spread fast, but only affected kids under 12 years old. The tribal elders called it a curse, Ruth told me. Said the children were being changed into something else. The settlers thought it was contagious, so they quarantined the whole area. Within 6 months, 23 children had died. But according to tribal records Ruth showed me, they weren't really dead. The disease had transformed them somehow. The tribe buried them in a mass grave and abandoned the area. Where exactly was this grave? I asked. Ruth pulled out a 1,847 survey map and compared it to a modern topographical map of the park. The burial site was right under the main campground pavilion. That night, I brought different equipment to work. I'd borrowed a medical scanner from Dr. Sarah Kim at the Sisters Clinic, EGD, a handheld device that could detect body heat and heart rates through thermal imaging. If something was really out there, this would find it. Around 11 p.m., the scanner started picking up signals. Heat signatures appeared around the campground, small, child-sized, but moving too fast. Normal human body temperature is 98.6 degrees. These readings showed 103 to 105 degrees. Heart rates over 150 beats per minute. Whatever was out there was alive, but not normal. I followed the signals toward the old campground area. My flashlight beam showed dozens of small footprints in the dirt, fresh prints with 6 toes each, pressed deep into the ground by something much heavier than a normal child. Then I heard them, children laughing and playing somewhere in the darkness ahead. Not scary laughter, just kids having fun. But there were no children in the park. The nearest campers were a retired couple in an RV near the front entrance. I followed, the sounds deeper into the woods, the medical scanner beeping faster as the heat signatures got stronger. That's when I found the cave entrance. Hidden under the main pavilion, behind a maintenance shed, was a hole in the ground I'd never noticed before. It was barely 3 feet wide, but my flashlight beam disappeared into darkness. The scanner showed multiple heat sources moving around down there. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone down there?" The laughing stopped. Then, after a long silence, a child's voice answered. "Are you the new ranger lady?" The voice was clear, speaking perfect English. I knelt down by the cave entrance. "Yes, I'm Amanda. What's your name?" "I'm Tommy. "We've been watching you. You seem nice." "How many of you are down there, Tommy?" "All of us, 23. We've been here a really long time." I lowered my phone's flashlight into the cave. About 10 feet down, I could see a child's face looking up at me. Pale skin, normal features, but when he smiled, I counted 6 fingers on the hand he waved with. "Tommy, how long have you been living down here?" "Since the sickness. The grown-ups said we were changing, so we had to hide. But we're not sick anymore. We just look a little different." Over the next hour, more children appeared in the cave opening. They told me their story. The disease hadn't killed them, it had changed them. Made them stronger, faster, able to live underground. Their body temperature ran higher than normal humans, and they developed enhanced hearing and night vision. For 175 years, they'd been living in a cave system under the park, only coming out at night to find food and supplies. They'd learned modern English by listening to park visitors. They knew about cars, cell phones, and the internet, but they'd never had contact with the outside world. "We just wanted to say hello," a little girl named Mary explained. "We put our hands on your truck because we thought you might be different from the other rangers." The last one got scared and stopped coming to work. That explained Mike Harrison's early retirement. I started bringing them food and supplies. Simple things: sandwiches, fruit, children's books, small toys. They were incredibly intelligent and curious about the modern world. They asked questions about everything: how cars worked, what cities were like, why people used computers. But they were still children in many ways. They played games, told jokes, and got excited about simple things like candy or new clothes. The disease had preserved them somehow, keeping them young even after all these years. I kept their existence secret for 3 months. But other park visitors started noticing increased activity. More sightings of small figures running between trees. Strange sounds at night, children's voices where no children should be. The reports reached the state office in Salem. In February 2020, a team of researchers arrived at Sisters State Park to investigate the paranormal activity. They brought sophisticated equipment, electromagnetic sensors, thermal cameras, and recording devices. I tried to warn the children to stay hidden, but they were too curious. On February 18th, the research team captured clear footage of 3 children playing near the lake at 2 a.m. The video showed their 6-fingered hands and unusual movement patterns. Within 48 hours, the park was swarming with federal agents, Department of Homeland Security, Centers for Disease Control, and military personnel. They found the cave system and captured all 23 children. I was ordered to stay away from the area. When I protested, Agent Lisa Chen, no relation, from the CDC, explained the situation. "These children represent a unique biological phenomenon," she said. "They need medical study to understand how they've survived and what caused their mutations. This is a matter of national security. They're not specimens," I argued. "They're kids who've been hiding for over a century. They have rights." "Not according to federal law. Technically, they died in 1847. They don't exist in any official records." The children were taken to an undisclosed research facility. I never saw them again. The official story released to the media blamed the sightings on a family of rare albino deer that had been living in the park. The federal agents confiscated all my photos, videos, and documentation. My phone was wiped clean. I was transferred to Crater Lake National Park within a week. Carol Webb told me it was a promotion, but I knew better. They wanted me away from Sisters and away from any reporters who might ask questions. For the past 4 years, I've tried to expose what really happened. I've contacted journalists, submitted Freedom of Information Act requests, and reached out to tribal leaders. Every inquiry gets buried in bureaucratic red tape. The children's cave system was filled with concrete and covered over. The park installed new picnic tables right on top of the burial site. But I still have the medical scanner readings saved on an old SD card. Proof that 23 living, breathing children were taken by the government and classified as biological specimens. I'm telling this story now because I'm retiring next month. I've spent my entire career protecting people from dangers in the wilderness. But the real danger wasn't wild animals or natural disasters. It was what we did to 23 children who had been hiding in the dark for 175 years, just wanting someone to acknowledge they existed. If you ever visit Sisters State Park and hear children laughing in the woods at night, remember Tommy and Mary and the others. Remember that sometimes the monsters in the forest aren't the ones hiding in the shadows. Sometimes we're the monsters. My name is Rosa Martinez, and I've been cutting hair for 15 years. I started as an apprentice right out of high school, working at a fancy salon in Portland. After 5 years there, I moved back to my hometown of Lakeview, Oregon, to help take care of my aging parents. I've handled everything from bridezillas demanding impossible hairstyles to fixing terrible home dye jobs that looked like rainbow disasters. I thought I'd seen it all in this business. But what happened last Tuesday morning changed everything I thought I knew about hair, traditions, and the power that some people believe lives inside us. Sometimes the simplest things we throw away every day carry more weight than we could ever imagine. I own Rosa's Hair Salon on Main Street in downtown Lakeview. It's a small town of about 2,500 people, surrounded by mountains and sitting right next to Goose Lake. The shop itself is nothing fancy, just 4 old-style salon chairs, a few wash basins, and cabinets full of the usual supplies. The linoleum floors creak when you walk, and the mirrors have those old Hollywood-style light bulbs around them that Mrs. Yamamoto installed back in the 1980 seconds. Mrs. Yamamoto was the previous owner. She ran this place for 40 years before she passed away 3 years ago. Her family sold me the shop for a fair price, probably because nobody else in town wanted to take over an old salon that needed so much work. Mrs. Yamamoto was one of those quiet, careful women who seemed to know everyone's business but never gossiped. She kept detailed appointment books going back decades, all written in her neat handwriting. Customers loved her because she remembered exactly how they liked their hair, even if they only came in twice a year. The salon has a comfortable routine. I open at 8 a.m., sweep the floors, check my appointment book, and set up my stations. Most of my customers are regulars, farm wives, school teachers, retired folks who've been coming here since before I was born. Tuesday mornings are usually slow, which gives me time to catch up on inventory and clean my tools properly. I've got my old CD player that runs through the same mix of country and classic rock, and the coffee pot that makes decent enough coffee to keep customers happy while they wait. My equipment is basic but reliable. 3 blow dryers that are probably 15 years old but still work fine. Electric clippers with various guards for men's cuts. A good set of scissors that I keep sharp and clean. 2 hair washing sinks with those black rubber necks that customers always complain are too hard. The hydraulic chairs pump up and down with that familiar whooshing sound. Everything smells like shampoo, hairspray, and that blue disinfectant solution I keep my combs in. Last Tuesday started like any other morning. I unlocked the front door at exactly 8 a.m., flipped the sign to open, and started my usual routine. The weather was typical for March in Oregon, Mrs. 2. Gray skies and a light drizzle that made everything look washed out. I had 3 appointments scheduled. Mrs. Foster at 9 a.m., Jenny Robinson at 11 a.m. for highlights, and old Mr. Peterson at 2 p.m. for his monthly trim. Mrs. Foster has been coming in every Tuesday for the past year, ever since I took over the shop. She's probably in her 70s, always wears the same brown wool coat, and usually talks about her grandchildren or complains about the weather. She gets a simple wash and set, nothing fancy, just the kind of style that older ladies prefer. She's always been one of my easier customers, never asks for dramatic changes, always pays in exact cash, and tips exactly $2 every time. But when she walked in that Tuesday morning, something felt different about her. She seemed nervous, kept looking around the shop like she'd never been there before. Her hands were shaking a little when she hung up her coat, and she wouldn't make eye contact with me in the mirror while I got her settled in. The chair. "The usual today, Mrs. Foster?" I asked, draping the plastic cape around her shoulders. She nodded but didn't say anything. Usually she chatted non-stop from the moment she sat down. I led her over to the washing sink and started running the water, testing the temperature on my wrist like always. The warm water seemed to relax her a little, and I began working the shampoo through her thin gray hair. "Rosa," she said quietly, so quiet I almost couldn't hear her over the running water. "We need to talk about something important." I kept massaging the shampoo into her scalp. "Of course, Mrs. Foster. What's on your mind?" She was quiet for a long moment while I rinsed her hair. When I wrapped a towel around her head and helped her back to the styling chair, she finally spoke again. "You need to stop throwing away the hair." she whispered. I paused with my comb halfway through her wet hair. I'm sorry, what do you mean? The hair you cut off. You've been throwing it away, haven't you? Just sweeping it up and putting it in the trash like it's nothing. I felt confused. Well, yes, that's what you do with cut hair. What else would I do with it? Mrs. Foster's face went pale in the mirror. Oh no, oh Rosa, no, Mrs. Yamamoto never told you about the special arrangement. Special arrangement? What special arrangement? She started wringing her hands in her lap. Some of us, certain families in town, our hair was never supposed to be thrown away. Mrs. Yamamoto understood. She had a system. I stopped cutting and looked at her reflection. Mrs. Foster, I don't understand what you're talking about. The back room, she said. Did you ever look in the back room? Really look? I had been in the back room hundreds of times. It's where I store extra supplies, old equipment, and cleaning materials. But now that she mentioned it, I realized I'd never really examined everything back there. When I bought the place, Mrs. Yamamoto's family had cleaned out most of her personal items, but they left behind boxes of old salon supplies that I figured I'd sort through eventually. You need to check, Mrs. Foster said urgently, before more bad things happen to people. What bad things? But she clammed up after that, wouldn't say another word about it. I finished her haircut in uncomfortable silence, and she paid and left quickly without her usual small talk. After she was gone, I walked to the back room and really looked around for the first time. Most of the space was taken up by shelves of shampoo bottles, boxes of hair color, and old equipment covered in dust. But in the far corner, behind a stack of boxes, I found something I'd never noticed before. It was a tall metal cabinet with dozens of small drawers, like the kind you might see in an old library for organizing files. Each drawer had a handwritten label with a name and dates. I pulled open the first drawer and found a clear plastic bag filled with hair. Gray hair, carefully braided and tied with a small piece of string. The label read, Margaret Chen, 1987 to 2003. I opened drawer after drawer. Each one contained a similar bag of hair with names I recognized, families that had lived in Lakeview for generations. The Watson family, the Martinez family, the Blackfeathers. Some of the dates went back to the 1960 seconds. There were dozens of them, all carefully organized and preserved. My hands were shaking as I realized what this meant. For decades, Mrs. Yamamoto had been collecting and saving the hair of certain customers instead of throwing it away. But why? And how was I supposed to know which customers were part of this, whatever this was? I locked up the salon early and drove straight to the library. If there was some kind of local tradition I didn't know about, maybe I could find information there. The librarian, Miss Patterson, had lived in Lakeview her whole life. If anyone would know about this, it would be her. Oh, honey, she said when I described what I'd found. You really didn't know about the old traditions? She led me to a section of local history books and pulled out a thin volume about the Klamath tribes who originally lived in this area. She flipped to a chapter about spiritual beliefs and pointed to a paragraph about hair. Many Native American tribes believe that hair holds spiritual power. She read aloud. Cutting hair can weaken a person's spiritual protection, so it must be disposed of properly through ceremonial burial in sacred ground. For tribal members living in modern communities, traditional practices were often maintained quietly through arrangements with trusted community members. My stomach dropped. Are you saying that Mrs. Yamamoto was helping people follow their religious traditions? Miss Patterson nodded. There are several families in town with Klamath ancestry. Not everyone talks about it openly, but the old beliefs are still important to some people. Mrs. Yamamoto was very respectful of different traditions. I felt sick. What happens if someone's hair isn't buried properly? According to the beliefs, it leaves the person spiritually vulnerable. Bad luck, accidents, illness. Things that could have been prevented if their spiritual protection was intact. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through all the haircuts I'd given over the past year. How many customers' hair had I thrown away that should have been saved? How many people had I unknowingly put at risk? That evening, I called Mrs. Foster. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for my call. Rosa, did you find the cabinet? Mrs. Foster, I need to understand what's happening. Whose hair was I supposed to save? She was quiet for a moment. The families with the old blood, The Watsons, the Martinez family, not family, but the Martinez family that's been here since the 1800s, not your family, dear. The Blackfeathers, obviously, the Chens, a few others, we all have Klamath ancestry, and some of us still follow the old ways. Why didn't anyone tell me? Mrs. Yamamoto never told us she was going to sell the shop. When she got sick, it happened so fast. We hoped you would just continue what she was doing. I felt terrible. Mrs. Foster, I've been throwing hair away for a year. What does that mean for your families? Her voice got very small. Rosa, the Watson family lost both their children in that car accident last month, Tommy and Sarah, just 17 and 19 years old. That intersection has been safe for 50 years, but their car slid right into that tree. My blood ran cold. I remembered cutting Tommy's hair for his senior pictures in January. I remembered Sarah getting highlights for her birthday in December. Their hair had gone straight into my trash bag. The Martinez farm has been in that family for 4 generations, Mrs. Foster continued. This year, nothing will grow. The soil tests come back fine, but every crop they plant just dies. They might lose the farm. I had cut hair for 3 different Martinez family members over the past year. All of it thrown away. Mrs. Foster, what can I do? How do I fix this? You need to talk to Joe Blackfeather. He knows the old ceremonies. Maybe there's still time to make things right. I met Joe Blackfeather the next morning at his house on the outskirts of town. He was probably in his 80s, with long gray hair braided down his back and eyes that seemed to see right through me. His living room was filled with Native American art and the smell of sage. Sit down, Rosa, he said before I could even explain why I was there. Mrs. Foster already called me. Mr. Blackfeather, I had no idea about any of this. I never meant to disrespect anyone's beliefs. He nodded slowly. Mrs. Yamamoto was a good woman. She understood that traditions don't always fit neatly into the modern world. She helped us maintain our practices quietly, without drawing attention. Can I fix what I've done wrong? His face was grave. The hair of our people carries their spiritual connection to their ancestors and the earth. When it's thrown away like garbage, it breaks that protection. The accidents, the crop failures, too, these aren't coincidences. What can I do? Normally, we would collect the discarded hair and bury it properly with ceremonies at the sacred site. But Mrs. Foster tells me you threw the hair in the town dumpster. I nodded, feeling sick. The dump burned last month, didn't it? All that hair is gone, destroyed by fire. That makes the spiritual damage much worse. I felt like I was going to throw up. Is there nothing I can do? Joe was quiet for a long time, looking out his window toward the mountains. There is one possibility, but it requires a great sacrifice. Anything. I'll do anything. You must offer something equally powerful to replace what was lost. Your own hair, cut with the proper prayers and buried at the sacred site. But once you make this choice, you become connected to our traditions forever. You become a keeper of the old ways. I didn't hesitate. Yes, let's do it. That afternoon, Joe came to my salon with his daughter Marie, who served as a witness. I sat in my own styling chair while Joe said prayers in the Klamath language and carefully cut off all my long black hair that I'd been growing for 5 years. The moment the scissors made the first cut, the temperature in the salon dropped by at least 20 degrees. All 3 of my mirrors cracked at exactly the same time with loud snapping sounds. My blow dryers turned on by themselves and started sparking. The lights flickered and went out. In the broken mirrors, I could see faces, dozens of faces looking back at me. Men, women, children. Some looked angry, some looked sad, but they were all staring directly at me. I recognized some of them. Tommy and Sarah Watson. Members of the Martinez family, people whose hair I had thrown away over the past year. They know what you're doing, Joe said calmly, continuing to cut my hair despite the chaos around us. They're waiting to see if your sacrifice is genuine. When he finished cutting, Joe gathered all my hair into a cloth bundle. The supernatural activity in the salon stopped immediately. The faces in the mirrors disappeared, and the temperature returned to normal. We drove to the sacred burial site near Goose Lake. It was a place I'd driven past hundreds of times but never really noticed. A small grove of old oak trees on a hill overlooking the water. Joe explained that his people had been burying their dead here for over 1,000 years. As Joe dug a small hole and placed my hair bundle inside while saying prayers, I started seeing them again. The translucent figures of the accident victims and others who had suffered because of my ignorance. They stood in a circle around us, watching. But this time, they didn't look angry. They looked relieved. Your sacrifice has temporarily opened the doorway between the world of the living and the world of the dead, Joe explained. They can communicate now, but only for a short time. The spirits began showing me visions, not speaking, but somehow placing images directly into my mind. I saw the truth about the recent accidents and misfortunes. The car accident that killed the Watson children wasn't caused by slippery roads. Someone had loosened the wheel bolts on their car. The Martinez family's crop failures weren't due to soil problems. Someone had been poisoning their irrigation water. The other accidents and business failures that had hit families with Klamath ancestry, they were all deliberate. Mayor Robert Henley had been systematically targeting mixed heritage families in Lakeview. He wanted to buy their land cheaply for a development project, a shopping center, and a hotel complex that would make him millions. When my careless disposal of their hair removed their spiritual protection, it made them vulnerable to his sabotage. The spirits led me to evidence. In the mayor's garage, I found tools with traces of brake fluid and metal shavings. In his office, I discovered documents showing his planned development and lists of properties he wanted to acquire. He had caused 6 deaths over 2 years, all to steal land for profit. I called the state police with the evidence. Mayor Henley was arrested within a week. Faced with overwhelming proof of his crimes, he confessed to everything. The development scheme collapsed, and the families got their property back. After the mayor's arrest, the strange phenomena in town stopped completely. The Martinez crops began growing again. The curse of bad luck that had plagued the affected families lifted, but I was changed forever. My hair grew back completely white instead of black, marking me as what Joe called a bridge keeper, someone who maintains connections between different worlds and cultures. Joe taught me the proper Klamath ceremonies for handling hair and other traditional practices. My salon became something more than just a business. I never charged native families for haircuts, and I always saved their hair for proper ceremonial burial. Word spread quietly through networks I didn't even know existed. Other salon owners from across Oregon started contacting me, asking for guidance. They had found similar collections of preserved hair in shops they'd inherited, or they'd noticed patterns of bad luck among certain customers after they'd taken over old businesses. I realized that there are many places where old spiritual agreements have been forgotten when businesses change hands. Traditional practices that kept communities in balance for generations get lost when the people who maintained them pass away without passing on the knowledge. Now I train other hairdressers to recognize and respect these traditions. I've become an unofficial historian of Lakeview's mixed cultural heritage, documenting the stories of families who have kept old ways alive in a modern world. My shop thrives as both a regular salon and a secret keeper of old spiritual traditions. I've learned that being a professional sometimes means much more than just doing your job well. Sometimes it means becoming a guardian of things that matter more than money or convenience. I still cut hair 5 days a week, still gossip with customers about whose daughter is getting married and whose son made the football team. But now I also carry the weight of traditions that go back thousands of years, and I wouldn't change a thing about it.